Hi, I'm Ben Caine. I'm the founder of Lean House, and today I just thought I'd do a short video explaining how I became an architect and what are the sorts of things that are influenced how we work at Lean House. So I graduated architecture at UWA in 2008, and around the same time I was getting ready to build a house for my family, and it's actually this house across the road here. We subdivided one big block and turned it to two side-by-side houses. We sold one block and kept the other for ourselves. And this was the first time I really got to understand how you build a house, because I was actually the owner builder. And I had to become the owner builder because it's the only way we could afford to do it. But I learned so much about how individual trades work, how much wastage there is in construction, the economics of construction, how long things take, learning construction details. But most of all, having moved into the house and designed it, and having designed the house to the best possible way I was taught, I found that the performance of the home was kind of lacking. It's a solar passive home, it's double brick, it does have insulation in the brick cavity, but in summer the home still overheated, and in winter the home was still very cold. And a lot of that came down to the failure of the building envelope and the failure of the windows. So I just remember thinking to myself, wow, I've done everything they've taught us at university. I got, at the time, a 7-star home, which was very high for the time when the minimum was 5, but the house still did not perform very well. And I just remember thinking, I have to figure out what can we do better next time. And that was really the start of the journey of understanding, building science and performance in construction. So as I was going through the journey of designing and building this house, I sought advice from anyone that would listen, or anyone that was free to listen and offer me advice. But I actually found from my teachers at university, and I found from talking to other architects, that they weren't particularly interested or adept at criticizing the construction detailing of how things actually work, or what is actually the correct way of achieving drainage on a balcony, or the correct way of detailing for insulation or water tightness. And I sort of plowed ahead anyway, hoping that it would all work out. And it did work out. But at the same time, it kind of struck me that if I'm asking all these people for, their advice and their knowledge, and that's not available, it's a bit of a problem. So I wanted to keep the design of the house really simple because I was the one building it. I didn't want to try anything new. I wanted to keep it quite conventional, keep it under budget. And we did build the house at the time for quite a low price. I think it was $1,700 a square metre in 2009, which at the price was on par with a sort of, project home type level of construction. But this is an architectural home, and I did try quite a few things which I still carry through today. One of which is a dual occupancy design. So above the garage there's actually a fully self-contained apartment. And when we were a young family, we didn't need the whole house, we had babies. And so we actually rented out the self-contained apartment, and that helped us pay the mortgage and gave us a bit of a financial buffer when my wife was off work looking after kids. And so that was a really great discovery, that you can actually build something into your house that will generate income and make it a much more sustainable way of living, financially sustainable way of living. The other things we did, we took some inspiration from our trips to Europe, where we saw roller shutters quite neatly integrated into windows, and making some adaptations to how the bricks were laid, we were able to create a cavity where we could actually fully conceal roller shutters to all the bedrooms and all the sort of harsh sun-exposed windows. And we found that was actually really good. It meant we could have full block out at night, but we could also trap the warmth in winter, and we could exclude the heat of the day from coming into the house, or certainly into the bedrooms in summer. And so Roller shutters have always been something that's kind of ugly and underappreciated in Australia, but we were looking for a way to incorporate them in a kind of neat way that was actually really functional. And that's one thing that really worked, and I still do that from time to time today. Yeah, so that was the first time I built a home, and I was an owner builder and I was the designer and hadn't really had much experience in the workforce. And we lived in that house for 3 years. It was really good to us. We made some money, and I was pretty hungry to start the next project, something a bit better for a family with more backyard. And also I really wanted to explore a better quality of build. So we ended up selling that house and bought a much bigger block in Floreat for around the same sort of money. So it's literally 400 metres away. We're going to drive there now. You've all seen it before on my videos. But yeah, we managed to buy this large block. It came up for sale. It was roughly the same price as that house we were selling. And it presented an opportunity to correct some of the mistakes from the first house, mainly around the building envelope, but definitely wanted to include some of the things that worked, which was like the dual occupancy type design. Still solar passive, of course, but this time, high quality insulation, better detailing, better quality windows. And when I became aware of passive house, then of course I had to introduce heat recovery, ventilation, and all those sorts of things. Road, here we are, and we'll just pull in and we'll talk about everything else. We got the opportunity to build our own house, and that brought a lot of interesting discussions with my wife around what to build and how big, and budget, of course, is a main factor. So it's always good to be your own client from time to time so you can sort of understand the pain points in the process. And I always had an idea that if I was going to be an architect, I really want to be closely involved in the construction phase, especially after doing the first house. And so I've always sought out relationships with builders that I can collaborate with and that I can learn from, and we can sort of collaborate together and find the best sort of possible solution. But like any project, there's kind of three main constraints. So the first constraint's always going to be the site, right? What are you dealing with? What are the constraints of the site? Either planning or environmental, sun, shade, overlooking, slopes, those sorts of things. So number one is always going to be the site. Number two, another constraint's going to be the brief. So it's like, what are you trying to achieve? Is it possible on the site? And the other is your budget. So there's these three things: site, brief, and budget. And I'm always speaking to new clients about how our initial discussions are around trying to find like the perfect nexus, that perfect overlap between site, brief, and budget. And if we can do that, we're set up for project success. So when you're doing it for yourself, for your own family, or with your wife, we always had to sort of bring it back. It would have been great to have built a really large house, because that's very common here in Floreat. But the reality is our budget just simply did not allow for that. We had a large site, and so it made sense to build a single-storey home. Single-storey homes are more friendly in terms of, getting around, and more space efficient, and you're not paying for stairs, you're not paying for scaffolding, and they're quicker to build. So it was a much more budget-friendly option. And I discovered that building an equivalent home going from double-storey design to single-storey would probably save us $250,000. And this is, 6-7 years ago. So the decision was made single-storey. And that's highly unusual given the area is mostly sort of full of two-storey homes. But a single story really worked out for us. And when you have a single story design, you're able to do some more interesting things, like have high ceilings, for example, and to sort of make a much more, architectural gesture, rather than plowing all your money into going up a second story. So yeah, basically we sought to come up with the most economical design that fitted all of our requirements. And it just so happened to be single story and very much a square shape. We absolutely incorporated in our finances that we would need to have a self-contained apartment built into the design. And we decided to prioritise the quality of the building envelope over, say, luxurious finishes internally. So inside we've been quite basic, I would say, but kind of timeless with the finishes. And it's because we want someone to come into the house in 20 years' time, or us living here in 20 years' time, and not feel like it's dated. But we can, upgrade things as we go. Building your own home, for us, I really wanted to have tight control over where the money was going, so I could decide whether to increase, say, expenditure in the kitchen or save money somewhere else and then have money left over for a pool. And so just have control over all these little buckets of money. And the best way to do that is to work with your builder quite early, so you can start to get that sort of detailed feedback, and then you can make, minor adjustments as you go, so that if you have a fixed budget, like for us, we had a fixed budget, we could actually sort of play around a little bit. For example, windows, the cost of windows can vary dramatically by how many you have and the type of doors and windows that you choose. You could make small changes to the specification of windows or small changes to the size and number of windows, and you could save potentially $10,000, $20,000, and that may be your budget for landscaping, for example. And so for my clients, I really want them to have the opportunity to have a sense of control over where the money is spent in a way that is important to them. For us, I wanted to be a little bit bold with the architecture, but not at a high cost. So the shape of the house and the form of the home had to be something really simple, really repetitive, and with no sort of structural acrobatics. So we were able to come up with a solution that's like full timber construction, all prefabricated, very repetitive roof line, and that roof line then translates into the spaces internally. So we have high ceilings, for example, in the more public sort of grand spaces like the entry and the living room. And then when the roof line dips down, you've got more sort of snug, intimate spaces like where we watch TV or the laundry or a bathroom, those sorts of things. Just being clever around how the architecture relates to how it's built, and which relates also to how the house is used internally. They're all little decisions that help contribute to a more sort of cohesive overall design that makes sense, both when you're designing it, when you're building it, and when you're actually living in it. And it helps to make the budget sort of stretch a bit further, but by still getting, a remarkable outcome. There's always compromises when you're building or designing. Not many people can just say yes to every possible option and make the house bigger for every sort of situation. So if you're making a compromise, you want to kind of see that the choices you're making have value across the board, value in functionality, value in adaptability, value in performance, value in the constructability of it. And so these are the things I really try to think about at every stage of design and construction. So there's a lot to be learned about construction and design on the ground. And I've found that I really enjoy the prototyping aspect of what we do at Lean House. Every house is a small improvement on an evolution from the house before, whether it's some of the products we use or just the nuances of design or the detailing. There's this sort of rapid prototyping that we're lucky to do. If I had any advice for a young architect starting out or building designer, I would say to try and immerse yourself in the practice of construction and design as much as possible. There's so much to learn and there's so many mistakes to be made. So just visit building sites, be curious, ask questions, never make any assumptions about why things are the way they are, because Unfortunately, the way we build in general in WA is not great. And so if you just assume that something you're looking at is the right way to do things, it's probably not. So just always question, like, look at things and say, well, why is that balcony set down this way, or why isn't it set down? How does the waterproofing work? How long does this material last? How cool will this material keep the building? Always ask the questions, be curious and be involved. If you can do work experience on a building site, that's fantastic. If you can talk to material suppliers, if you can, understand the weaknesses of the planning scheme, there's just so many different areas in what we do. And I would say that just the act of challenging and being curious and doing a deep dive whenever you have a thought bubble to just really understand, it goes a long way and builds that body of knowledge. I would say that some of the best learnings have been when something has not been clear to me and I've had to do a really deep dive to understand the answer. And sometimes the answer isn't easily available, and I have to come up with a solution that's actually kind of unique because there's no readily available solution. So, for example, this house has quite dark cladding, and I was concerned that dark cladding would result in the building overheating. And I looked for literature or scientific research that would tell me one way or another, am I doing an irresponsible thing by choosing a dark coloured metal cladding, given that we have a ventilated facade? But what I found is that neither the Passive House software nor any sort of scientific or academic literature really covered off this topic. So I had no way of checking it without doing a bit of a scientific test myself. And what I found is that the difference in temperature was minimal between choosing a lighter coloured cladding and a darker. So in the end, all things considered, we decided to go with what we wanted to do. And so far, it's been pretty good. So yeah, definitely always do a deep dive. Whenever something sticks up that you're not sure about, just get stuck in. That knowledge will stick with you forever, and it may inform how you design or build something for the rest of your life.